Before this story gets buried in evidence files and sealed court records, smash that subscribe button, like this video, and leave a comment if you think you can handle the truth, because once you step onto the green mile, there's no walking back. The mile. The gurney wheels screamed as they cut across the concrete floor, echoing down the narrow corridor like an alarm no one could shut off. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, bathing the hallway in a sickly green glow. Guards stood frozen, hands hovering near batons they no longer needed. In the center of it all lay the body of Daniel Mercer, death row inmate number 8142. Eyes wide open, lips tinged blue, a faint smile still carved into his face. He had been scheduled to die at midnight. Instead, he was already dead. Sing Sing Correctional Facility, upstate New York. Cell Block E, the Green Mile. By the time the prison doctor arrived, Mercer's skin was cold. No pulse. No visible wounds. No signs of struggle. The execution chamber sat untouched at the end of the corridor, electric chair humming softly, waiting for a man who would never arrive. And that was the first problem. The second problem was far worse. Daniel Mercer was not supposed to be here. 3 years earlier, the body of 12-year-old Lily Harper was found in a drainage culvert outside Millfield, a dying factory town with more boarded windows than streetlights. Her shoes were missing. Her hands were bound with green nylon rope. There were fingerprints on her jacket, DNA under her fingernails, and a confession signed in black ink. Daniel Mercer's confession. He had been arrested 48 hours after the body was discovered. A quiet janitor. No wife. No children. No criminal record. The kind of man neighbors described as polite and invisible. During interrogation, he'd asked for water twice, stared at the table for nearly an hour, then calmly admitted to everything. Case closed. The media devoured it. Headlines screamed for blood. Candlelight vigils turned into protests demanding the harshest punishment possible. Prosecutors fast-tracked the trial. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty. Death. But even then, something about the case didn't sit right with Detective Samuel Rourke. Rourke had been the first officer on scene the night Lily Harper was found. He remembered the smell of wet leaves and rusted metal, the way the girl's hair clung to her face like she'd been dragged through water, and the rope, bright green nylon, neatly tied, almost practiced. It wasn't the work of a panicked janitor. It was methodical, professional. Rourke had voiced his doubts quietly at first, then louder, then not at all. The department had no appetite for uncertainty. The town needed closure. The state needed a conviction. And Daniel Mercer gave them exactly what they wanted. Until now, Mercer's death sent shockwaves through the prison system. Inmates whispered about poison. Guards were interrogated. Surveillance footage was pulled. The autopsy was rushed. Cause of death, acute potassium cyanide poisoning. Time of death, approximately 9:17 p.m. Someone had murdered a man who was already sentenced to die, and whoever did it had access to death row. Federal investigators flooded Sing Sing within hours. The warden was placed on administrative leave. Cell Block E was locked down. Every guard, nurse, and maintenance worker became a suspect. Detective Rourke was called back onto the case that night. He stood outside Mercer's cell, staring at the thin mattress, the steel sink, the toilet bolted to the floor. Nothing looked disturbed. No overturned furniture. No defensive marks on the walls. The food tray sat untouched on the narrow shelf. What about the cameras? Rourke asked. A corrections officer shook his head. Blind spot. Same as always. Union issues. Of course it was. Rourke leaned closer to the bars. On the concrete floor, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was a faint green fiber. Nylon. The same shade as the rope. The press conference the next morning was a disaster. Reporters shouted over one another. Questions flew like bullets. Was Mercer silenced? Was he innocent? Is there a killer inside your prison? The state denied everything. They insisted Mercer's guilt was absolute. His death, they said, was an internal security failure. Nothing more. Rourke didn't buy it. Neither did Elena Cruz. Cruz was an investigative journalist with a reputation for tearing open sealed cases, and exposing uncomfortable truths. She'd covered the Harper murder years earlier and never let it go. When Mercer died, she was already on the road north. She met Rourke outside a diner just off Route 9, the kind of place where the coffee tasted burnt and the waitresses knew everyone's secrets. "You think he was innocent," she said, skipping pleasantries. "I think someone was scared he might talk," Rourke replied. "About what?" Rourke slid a file across the table. "About this." Inside were crime scene photos that had never made it into evidence. Additional fibers. Tire impressions near the culvert that didn't match Mercer's vehicle. And a witness statement from a truck driver who'd reported seeing a dark green utility van parked near the drainage ditch the night Lily disappeared. The statement had been marked unreliable and buried. Cruz's eyes narrowed. "This van belongs to a private contractor," Rourke said. "Did maintenance work for the city. Access to ropes, tools, chemicals." "And access to the prison?" she asked. Rourke didn't answer. He didn't need to. As the investigation deepened, things began to unravel fast. One of the prison nurses resigned without notice. A guard transferred to a facility in Nevada under an emergency reassignment. Files went missing. Emails were deleted. Cruz's source inside the Department of Corrections stopped returning calls. Then came the warning. A plain white envelope slid under Cruz's hotel room door. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Lily Harper, alive, standing beside a man whose face had been scratched out with black ink. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, "Stop digging." That night, Rourke's car was sideswiped on a deserted road. A hit-and-run. No witnesses. No plates. Someone was watching. Someone with reach. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Mercer's cellmate on the row, an aging lifer named Harold Pike, requested protective custody. Pike had been silent for years, known for staring at the walls and humming to himself. But after Mercer's death, he started talking. He told investigators that Mercer had been terrified in his final weeks. Now dying, Pike said, of someone else. Mercer had whispered about a man who visited the row unofficially. No badge, no uniform, always smelled like chemicals and oil, always walked the Green Mile like he owned it. Pike said Mercer had finally remembered something. Something he'd seen the night Lily died. Something that made him recant. He never got the chance. The autopsy report came back with an addendum. Traces of cyanide were found in Mercer's water line, the prison's internal plumbing, meaning the poison wasn't slipped into food or drink. It was engineered, premeditated, and impossible without blueprints. Rourke stared at the report as the weight of it sank in. The Green Mile wasn't just a corridor. It was a system, one that could erase mistakes as easily as it executed inmates. Cruz published her first piece that night. The headline read, "The man who died twice was a state about to execute an innocent prisoner?" It went viral within hours. By morning, the governor's office demanded answers. By afternoon, someone tried to erase the evidence. At 2:43 a.m., a fire alarm blared inside Sing Sing. Smoke filled the administrative wing. Sprinklers soaked decades of records. When firefighters cleared the building, one room was reduced to ash. The evidence archive. Every document related to the Harper case. Gone. Almost every document. Hidden behind a false panel in a forgotten storage locker, investigators found a single surviving box. Inside was a maintenance log from 3 years earlier. One name appeared repeatedly. A contractor assigned to Millfield. A man with prison access clearance. A man whose signature matched the handwriting on the photograph. But when Rourke typed the name into the system, the screen froze. The file had been sealed, classified, and stamped with a warning he'd never seen before. Do not pursue. Rourke felt his pulse spike as a cold realization took hold. Daniel Mercer hadn't been executed because he was guilty. He had been murdered because he was finally ready to tell the truth. And whoever walked the Green Mile that night was still free. By dawn, Detective Samuel Rourke knew two things for certain. The truth was buried deeper than any case he'd ever touched, and someone with power was determined to keep it there. The sealed file sat on his desk like a loaded weapon. Name, Thomas Caldwell. Status, restricted federal oversight. Clearance, level black. Rourke had spent 20 years chasing murderers, drug traffickers, and liars who thought they were smarter than the law. He had never seen a clearance designation like that. Not in homicide, not in internal affairs, not even during his brief stint on a joint task force after September 11th. Thomas Caldwell wasn't just protected, he was untouchable. Caldwell's background, what little Rourke could access, painted a disturbingly clean picture. Former military logistics, private infrastructure contractor, specialized in municipal maintenance, water systems, waste management, underground utilities. The kind of work no one noticed unless it failed. The kind of work that gave a man access to places no one thought to lock, including prisons, including crime scenes, including the water line on death row. Rourke leaned back in his chair as the office around him buzzed with activity. Phones rang, printers spat paper, uniforms moved fast, but none of it mattered. He could feel it now, the invisible wall closing in. He picked up his phone and dialed Elena Cruz. It rang once, twice, then voicemail. Cruz hadn't slept. Her hotel room was littered with printed emails, old court transcripts, and handwritten notes taped to the walls. The Harper case had always haunted her, but now it felt personal. The photograph shoved under her door wasn't just a threat. It was proof. Proof Lily Harper had been alive longer than the official timeline said. Proof the state had lied. Her laptop chimed. A new email, anonymous, routed through 3 different servers. You're close. Too close. Below it, a scanned document. A city maintenance contract dated 4 years earlier. Thomas Caldwell's company name sat at the top. Beneath it, a list of assigned projects. Millfield drainage upgrades. Prison water infrastructure assessment. Temporary access permits for Sing Sing Correctional Facility. Cruz felt her stomach tighten. This wasn't coincidence. This was choreography. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door. That was when she noticed it. Her hotel room window, unlocked. She was sure she'd locked it. Slowly, she stepped back inside, scanning the room. Nothing was missing. No drawers disturbed. No obvious signs of a search. Except her wall. One of the taped transcripts was gone. The one containing Daniel Mercer's original confession. Someone had been here, and they knew exactly what to take. Rourke found her an hour later at a coffee shop off the interstate, hands wrapped tightly around a paper cup she hadn't touched. "Their cleaning house," she said before he could speak. "Evidence. Witnesses. Anyone who connects Mercer to Caldwell." Rourke nodded. "Then we move faster." "Or quieter," Cruz replied. "Because whoever Caldwell is, he's not just a contractor. He's a fixer." They pulled records together. Off-grid properties, shell companies, overlapping timelines. A pattern emerged. Wherever Caldwell worked, bad things followed. Disappearances, accidents, fires labeled electrical, witnesses who recanted or vanished, including one name that made Rourke's blood run cold. Harold Pike, Mercer's former cellmate. Pike had been transferred to protective custody less than 12 hours earlier. Current status, unknown. Rourke slammed his fist on the table. "Give me the transport logs." Cruz's phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "Check the van." Attached was a photo. A dark green utility van parked behind a warehouse at the edge of Millfield. The license plate partially obscured. The logo on the side barely visible beneath peeling paint. The same van from the truck driver's statement. The same van Lily Harper was last seen near. Rourke stood. "We're going." The warehouse smelled like oil and rust. A single security light flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The van sat exactly where the photo had shown it, doors locked, windows tinted black. Rourke pried the back door open. Inside were coils of green nylon rope, chemical containers, and a stack of laminated access badges. Sing Sing, Millfield Utilities, Department of Corrections, all issued to different names, all bearing the same photograph. Thomas Caldwell. Cruz's breath caught. He was hiding in plain sight. Before Rourke could respond, headlights flared to the far end of the lot. An engine roared to life. The van's front door slammed shut. "Get down!" Rourke shouted. Gunfire cracked through the night, shattering glass. Crews hit the ground as Rourke returned fire, bullets ricocheting off metal. The headlights surged forward, swerving wildly, clipping the warehouse wall before disappearing down the road. Silence followed. Rourke's heart hammered in his chest as he scanned the darkness. Caldwell was gone, but he'd made a mistake. He'd left something behind. On the driver's seat lay a folded map, marked routes, timetables, and one location circled in red: Millfield Water Treatment Plant. The plant was scheduled for a routine shutdown that night. Rourke knew what that meant. They arrived too late. Emergency vehicles flooded the area. Workers lay coughing on the ground as hazmat teams rushed in. The air stank of chemicals and chlorine. Sirens wailed as residents were evacuated. Sabotage. Controlled. Precise. Not lethal, but terrifying enough to make headlines. Caldwell wasn't running. He was reminding them who held the leash. Inside the chaos, crews spotted a familiar face being loaded into an ambulance. Harold Pike. Alive. Barely. She grabbed Rourke's arm. "That's him." They pushed through medics until a nurse blocked their path. "He's critical. Cyanide exposure." Rourke froze. "Cyanide?" The nurse nodded. "Low dose. Enough to scare. Not enough to kill." A message. Pike's eyes fluttered open as they leaned close. His voice was barely a whisper. "He wasn't the killer," Pike rasped. "Mercer, he tried to save her." Rourke's pulse spiked. "Save who?" "Lily," Pike said. "Caldwell used the van. Took her. Mercer saw it. Tried to stop him." Cruz felt tears sting her eyes. Why did he say anything? Pike's lips trembled. He did. They broke him. Told him if he talked, more kids would die. The monitor flatlined for a moment before stabilizing. Pike slipped back into unconsciousness. Rourke stood there, stunned. Mercer hadn't confessed out of guilt. He had confessed to protect others. And Caldwell had made sure he never got the chance to undo it. Within hours, the story exploded. National news. Congressional inquiries. Protesters outside Sing Sing. Calls for the governor's resignation. The sealed file on Thomas Caldwell was suddenly very unsealed. And empty. Every digital record had been wiped. Every physical trace erased. Officially, Thomas Caldwell did not exist. Unofficially, Rourke and Cruz knew better. They followed the money next. Offshore accounts, defense subcontractors, shadow budgets hidden under disaster relief funding. Caldwell wasn't acting alone. He was part of a network designed to clean up mistakes. Quietly, permanently. The Green Mile wasn't just a prison corridor. It was a pipeline, a place where inconvenient truths went to die. Late that night, Cruz received one last message from the anonymous source. A single sentence. Checked Mercer's execution date. She pulled up the records, scrolling fast. Scheduled execution, midnight, June 14th. Lily Harper's disappearance, June 14th. Same date, different years. Her breath caught. Mercer hadn't just been trying to save Lily. He'd been trying to mark the date, to leave a trail. Cruz looked up at Rourke, her voice barely audible. "Caldwell didn't kill her to cover a crime," she said. "He killed her to test the system." Rourke's jaw tightened, and Mercer was the proof it worked. Outside, thunder rolled as a storm closed and over the city. Somewhere out there, Thomas Caldwell was watching the chaos unfold and preparing his final move, because the Green Mile had one more name to claim. The rain started just after midnight. It fell hard and relentless, washing the city in silver streaks that blurred streetlights and smeared reflections across the asphalt. Detective Samuel Rourke stood alone in his car outside the old Millfield courthouse, engine off, listening to the storm drum against the roof. This was where it ended, or where it finally began. Elena Cruz sat beside him, eyes fixed on the building's darkened steps. In her lap lay a manila folder, so thick it bowed at the edges. Inside was everything they'd salvaged: financial trails, witness statements, timestamps, and one final piece of evidence that hadn't come from a database or a leak. It had come from Daniel Mercer. 2 hours earlier, a public defender named Alice Moreno had contacted Cruz in a panic. She'd been Mercer's appellate attorney, assigned long after his conviction. She'd always believed in his innocence, but until now, belief was all she'd had. Tonight, she'd found something else. A handwritten letter hidden behind a loose brick in her office wall. Mercer had given it to her years ago with strict instructions. Only open this if I'm dead. The letter was dated the same day Lily Harper disappeared. If you're reading this, they've already won once. My name is Daniel Mercer. I did not kill Lily Harper. I saw the man who did. He drives a green utility van. Smells like oil and chemicals. He works the city but answers to something higher. When I tried to stop him, he told me he'd bury more children if I talked. They made me confess. They said the system needs monsters. I hope this letter proves them wrong. The Green Mile isn't just where they kill us. It's where the truth takes its last walk. Rourke folded the letter carefully, his hand steady despite the weight of it. We take this public, he said. Tonight. Cruz nodded. And we do it where they can't shut it down. They stepped out into the rain and crossed the street toward the courthouse steps. Camera crews were already gathering, tipped off by Cruz's editor. Social media had lit the fuse hours earlier. Hashtags trended. Live streams multiplied. The story was too big to bury now. Inside the courthouse, chaos reigned. Lawyers shouted into phones. Security scrambled. A federal injunction had been filed, then withdrawn. Someone, somewhere, was still pulling strings. And then movement. A man in a dark coat emerged from a side entrance, hood pulled low. He moved calmly, deliberately, as if he knew no one would stop him. Rourke recognized him instantly. Thomas Caldwell. Don't, Cruz whispered. But Rourke was already moving. Caldwell, he shouted, badge raised. It's over. Caldwell stopped. Slowly he turned. He looked older than his photos. Tired, almost relieved. Rain streaked down his face, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. You should have let it go, Caldwell said, his voice carrying through the storm. The system needs men like me. Rourke closed the distance, weapon drawn. You killed a child. Caldwell shook his head. I protected a structure, one you benefit from every day. Cruz raised her phone, recording. You murdered Daniel Mercer. No, Caldwell replied calmly. I corrected an error. The crowd had fallen silent. Every word streamed live. Rourke's finger tightened on the trigger. You're done. Caldwell smiled faintly. Am I? A gunshot cracked through the rain. Caldwell's body jerked, then collapsed onto the stone steps, blood mixing with rainwater as screams erupted. Rourke spun, weapon raised, scanning the crowd. The shot hadn't come from him. It had come from above. A sniper's bullet. The shooter was gone before anyone could react. Pandemonium followed. Caldwell was pronounced dead on the scene. No weapon found on his body. No accomplice identified. Surveillance cameras malfunctioned at the exact moment of the shot. Another coincidence. Or another correction. The official statement came hours later. Thomas Caldwell had been a lone actor, a rogue contractor. No evidence of a larger network. The same lie, but this time it didn't hold. Cruz released everything. Mercer's letter. Pike's testimony before he died 2 days later from complications. Financial records linking Caldwell's shell companies to federal black budgets. Footage of Caldwell's final words. The public outrage was immediate and ferocious. Independent commissions formed. Convictions were overturned. Families demanded answers. The Harper case was officially reopened. Daniel Mercer's name was cleared posthumously. His execution warrant was vacated. Too late to save him. Just in time to change everything else. 6 months later, the Green Mile was closed. Death Row at Sing Sing was decommissioned pending investigation. Lawmakers called it reform. Activists called it justice. Rourke called it a start. He stood at Mercer's grave on a cold autumn morning. Cruz beside him. The headstone was simple. Just a name. Just the truth. I'm sorry it took this long, Rourke said quietly. Cruz placed a letter beneath a small stone. He knew it might. As they turned to leave, Rourke's phone buzzed. Unknown number. A single text message appeared on the screen. The system still stands. Below it, a photo. A green utility van. Different city. Different state. Same rope. Same date circled in red. Rourke felt the chill settle deep in his bones. Somewhere, another Green Mile was waiting. And somewhere, someone was already walking it. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming.